You're listening to the Dungeons, Dragons, and Psychology Podcast. Hello, Cyclothids, and welcome to the Dungeons, Dragons, and Psychology Podcast. I am your host, Robert Walker, and joining me today for the first time is a new acquaintance who's going to be the expert of the subject at hand today, and that is Dan. Dan, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me. Expert's a pretty far stretch on that one, don't you?
Well, I would say between the two of us, you definitely count as the resident expert on this matter. And what we're going to be talking about today on this bonus episode is managing and playing a character that has dissociative personality disorder, commonly referred to as split personalities or multiple personality disorder. And it presents a lot of unique role-playing opportunities, but also some challenges. So why don't you start, Dan, by just telling us a little bit about the character that you have been playing that has dissociative personality disorder and a little bit about what got you interested in trying this.
Sure. Well, I play a Dragonborn. It was going to be, it was the easiest to have multiple personalities because there's 15 different types, including Fizzbands, however you put it. And so I talked with the DM and I said, I really want to do this. And so we started off with two. It started off, original character was Crystal and Topaz, since they're polar opposites. And we went from there. And as I continued to build, I essentially built 15 characters. With all the same equipment, which made it really interesting when you go from, the Crystal Barbarian, or the Crystal Dragonborn is a monk, Way of the Mercy, and then you have a Red Dragonborn who is a barbarian, which makes it really fun. But there was some tie-ins across characters, because the barbarian, to make it easier for myself as well as kind of plausible, took the background of a tavern brawler. So they all have like a connected link. And so it wasn't until I got to the more passive characters that it made a little bit more difficult in the role of weapons. And because I play the full gamut, I have folks that are like Mother Teresa. Makes it really fun because we'll heal anybody, friend or foe.
Yeah. Interesting. So you started with two originally that were kind of polar opposites, and then as this game progressed, you started collecting, or your character started identifying and waking up additional personalities within themselves. Is it just a two-person game, you and a DM, or are there multiple players in the game?
Oh, there is multiple players. There's actually so we've been playing together. We've been playing together for about 2.5, almost 3 years.
Wow.
Yeah, it was before pandemic, so we started playing in 2019. And my wife and two guys we met at a local comic book shop, or a tabletop gaming shop here in the Seattle area. And it's evolved. I mean, we've had a max of 6. And now we're just doing the 3 players plus the DM. And I've been playing, his name is Rycroft. And I've been playing Rycroft for 3 months now. And I was always fascinated with it because what I'm getting my master's in is mental health therapist. Actually, I'll be a full-blown mental health therapist in 14 days.
Oh, so congratulations.
It's really exciting.
That's a lot of work. I am just starting my master's program. I just started it this month in industrial and organizational psychology. So yeah, psychology, as you can tell by the name of the podcast, obviously, is definitely something that rings true to me. And I love role-playing games so much. And I think they're just so closely tied together. It gives you opportunity to safely experience so many different things, not just in your own psychology, but experience like the life and all of that of someone else as well, and really have a genuine respect for what other people have to live through and survive. And I think that's one of my favorite things about it, is the role-playing different roles and just kind of understanding the world from different eyes.
And that's actually what inspired my character a lot. So I originally was a teacher. My wife is still a teacher. We worked in one of the Houston area school districts before moving up here to Washington State. And she had children who already had multiple personalities at 6, at 7. Goodness. Yeah. And it's like, wow, what is going on? I mean, because I remember the little girl that really broke her. I mean, all of them broke our hearts, but she would have headphones on, and they were noise canceling headphones the school bought, like
Hmm.
good ones, not the cheap ones. And she was like, the voices are still talking to me. I can't even fathom what this child is going through. And now the child is 13, 14 years old.
Hmm.
And their life is just so controlled by that.
It would definitely have to be, especially when it's to such an extreme end of the spectrum on that. Do you feel like playing with that around the table has given you an appreciation of what it is, sort of like the chaoticness that can kind of exist within a mind or in a moment?
Definitely. I'm thinking about all the influences that Rycroft, what built Rycroft. Because while I was getting my master's, I worked as a care coordinator for foster children here in the Seattle area. And reactive attachment disorder
Hmm.
is like almost like a given diagnosis.
Right.
And it's so heartbreaking to watch them go through this. And going back to your question about, how many players are in the campaign, they didn't know. My
Mm.
wife didn't even know, because I usually DM. I've been a DM. I just passed up the mantle just for my last year because it's all practicum and internship.
Hmm.
And so we got into the habit of like not sharing because she didn't want to know. She wanted to be a surprise in my campaign. And I remember when the first instance in the reactions of the other players, they were like, "What is going on?" Because we had an NPC that was holding a dragon at bay, and my character just walks in and just stabs the wizard guy holding back the dragon. They're like, "What is he doing?" I'm like, and that opened up a conversation.
Let me ask you, that brings up a question for me as um, how do you and your dungeon master go about deciding what sort of events spark a role to see if your character needs to have a personality shift, or what's sort of the catalyst that makes that shift happen in game?
The way we described it was anytime they have to make a wisdom save, or if the DM goes, taps me kind of deal, because we use Discord, and I roll. And he picks when it happens,
Hmm.
or I get the liberty of choosing it as well. And so it's very fluid because like we're thinking about, stress in that manner. And it's like, well, battle is very stressful.
Hmm.
See what comes out. And I think about the first, the crystal version of Rycroft. The backstory that character has is accidentally killed his brother, decided not to kill anybody anymore, decided to heal the world, way of mercy.
Mm.
Doesn't even use hand of harm, only uses the hand of healing, and is lawful.
Interesting. So another question that I kind of have as you're talking about this is, when it comes time to level up, how long does that take you?
Besides three, all the big ones, it probably takes me like 2 hours.
Yeah.
At like 3, 6, whatever. I have to do it in chunks. I think I usually do. Well, what I will do is like the opposites, because I want them to stay consistent, at least with each other. So that'll 2 hour chunks. So I'll do probably like 3 or 4 at a time.
So let me ask you one other question, which is, while playing your character Rycroft, is there any specific insights you've had about yourself while you've been playing? Do any of the personalities speak to you individually? I mean, can you elaborate on that a little bit for the listeners?
What makes Rycroft an easy character to play is not choosing like famous people, but almost using aspects of myself in the character. I almost see it like a person standing in the middle and they're surrounded by people with mirrors or situations with mirrors. So, like, for example, I'm a 6'1", 250-pound white guy,
Hmm.
bald, in the 40s. And so when people look at me, they think one thing, or they expect me to act a certain way. And that's been throughout my life because I don't know if you can tell, but I can have a Southern accent.
Mm.
Um, I've unlearned it because I was a teacher for many years. But when people treat me as dumb, I start talking like this to make sure I prove their point because I, and it's like, well, that's what you want, so that's what I'm going to give you.
Yeah.
Or, I have a dog, I have a German Shepherd. Both she and I are the most lovable, kind people, but she barks because she's a
Mm-hmm.
German Shepherd. I have resting bitch face because I was a machinist for a long time. Uh, and so people are scared of us because I'm a 6'1" bald white guy with a German Shepherd.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have to act a certain way, or I have to overact opposite, like pendulum swing the opposite way.
Mm-hmm.
And so how this goes to Rycroft is like, well, I think of like copper dragons. They're notoriously the like the bard of the dragon family,
Yep.
right? And he's the cook, and I love cooking, and I sing when I cook because I'm the most happiest. And I think of like, oh, that's the copper dragon. That's the persona I can
Mm.
play, and like how I can do that. And then the flip side, like the red dragon, the angry, the barbarian. And I think about when I have to advocate for clients or children when people don't listen.
Mm.
And there are days where, I mean, I'm not going to go out and kill somebody because no, because they're not really willing to help out the situation. And so how that personifies into Rycroft is like, I'm the red barbarian. Oh, I'm just going to smash your head
Right.
in with a skillet or whatever, because that's what's held in the hand when I fail the constitution check.
Yeah, I did see. I think it's Ginny D Instagram user posted a D&D meme this last week that I thought was pretty funny, and it said something along the lines of one of the best things about role playing is that when somebody's acting dumb or evil, you can just hit them until they're not dumb or evil anymore, and you can't do that in real life.
No. And, that really brings it into the next part of it. It's why I think that people really don't play healers.
Yeah.
Or, it's almost like when I DM, so many people are like, who's the healer?
Mm-hmm.
I guess I have to be. It's like, it's almost like this very horrible task, but I think it's because to heal somebody in D&D, Pathfinder, Star Wars, whatever role-playing game, you hand them a healing potion, you just cast a spell to get rid of the curse,
Mm-hmm.
you put a poultice in their, and they're completely healed, and their malady is gone. But it shows the realization of we can't do that in real life.
Right.
And so there's this huge gut check, because I think we all have somebody who we wish we could heal or help that
Mm-hmm.
either refuses delivery, or maybe they're, I think of like terminal cancer.
One thing that I have always noticed that none of the systems really do is they don't ever really take healing, mental health into account. There's really no spells that are like, here's how you're going to deal with your depression, right? There's nothing that really focuses on mental health. So I think that's sort of an interesting correlation to our real world, because I think you can play with the idea that mental health is sort of beyond just the physical ailments and the curses and the things like that, whatever's going on inside your own mind. Sure, you could mind blank it away or change your memory with some spells to just erase those sort of things. But I think it is kind of important that the game has held true that mental health is one of those things that you sort of just have to embrace and deal with on your own, and deal with in it's not a snap of the fingers type of a situation.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it makes me wonder, like, how would somebody play a depressed character?
Mm-hmm.
And like, what would that look like in a session with a party? Because I do run groups where D&D is used for folks on like the autism spectrum who need help with social skills or
Mm-hmm.
working together, or not just ASD but social anxiety. And it's always real interesting to watch the character development and then the character evolution with especially the children that I work with. I had one kid, very shy, very rarely spoke, was possible selective mutism, but it was social anxiety, didn't get hit the markers for
Mm-hmm.
selective mutism. He ended up being a monk but he was a trash talking drunken master. And
Okay.
it's like, where did this person come from?
Sounds like a good way to express some things that you've not been saying in real life.
Exactly. And I always, and it's so fun to watch folks with social anxiety or, ASD or whatever. And, I'm a big fan of RuPaul's Drag Race. And a lot of the drag queens say, like, this is this persona, and they're opposite of what they are, that they have two definite personalities.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what also makes Rycroft really easy and fun to play, because I have so many references like that. I mean, even from my own childhood, like some of the personas are based off of my brother or my parents. And especially the Bard. The Bard is my dad. My dad could twist a knife and manipulate people like there's no tomorrow. He could slap you upside the head and say it's your fault, and you believe it. He's
one of those.
And that's the
Yep.
And that's what a bard could be if we take it pretty far. Or it could be this jovial person who's just out to sing and make a bit of coin.
Mm-hmm.
But I was also thinking of, like, how much of this person is actually just me. The Rycroft is just me. Back to the whole mirror thing, because I come from a blue collar family, extremely poor blue collar family from Ohio. And I'm there's only 3 of us with a master's degree or above, and the rest are blue collar. And so my family has, like, really shunned me because I've went this far. It's like, because I've given up my roots. And so it's like, I'm so pissed about that, because I'm like, why wouldn't you be happy for me?
Mm-hmm.
And and I can be a bit of an ass. I don't know if I'm allowed to say it, but it's like, I can be a bit like my dad. And so, yes, it's always that reflection of myself. And I think about, like, when I play a chaotic version of Rycroft, this is why I like your latest podcast or latest episode of, like, the great alignment debate.
Yeah.
It actually spawned one with my wife and I, but it was like how we defined what chaos is really defined our argument.
Yeah.
Because she's like, oh, it's disorder in society. And I'm like, well, it could be fanatic.
Yeah.
And it could go, and so with my different chaotic characters, there's one that's a chaotic, he would probably be like a crusader. And I'm like, well, that's chaotic good, unless you're looking at it from the other side, then it's chaotic evil.
Yeah.
I can be like that sometimes, especially with some of the folks that I've served, or some of the children I've served here in Washington State. I had a client who, just pretty much he was in the foster care system. Everybody was treating him like a drug user, and everybody ignored the fact that he had reactive attachment disorder.
Mm-hmm.
But he never got that diagnosis because everybody was blinded by his actions. And I think about, like, okay, what kind of character, and I bring him into the fold because he's such a wonderful kid. And it's like, which one would he be? Oh yeah, he'd be artificer of the group.
Nice.
He's the white artificer, and it's only because, like, the sweet kid that's underneath everything, and just wants to be hugged.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. Is we had that episode, the Great Alignment Debate, and it sparked so much conversation amongst listeners, a lot more than any of the other episodes seem to have done. And I think it's just because so many people hold alignment and their views on alignment like so close to their heart. But when you're talking about treatment and approaches to treating an individual with all sorts of different, mental health issues, there's so many different approaches that can be ideal in a situation. I think in that sense, and in our real world, you have to throw, like, the idea of alignment out of the window for that, because what one person might respond to, which is just like a rigid by the book, here's the steps of this treatment process, and it's all done through positive psychology, so it might be lawful good. But other people might respond to, being put in their place, and doing things that are not traditional treatment style is what's going to get them to open up and respond. So I don't know. It's just one of those things while you were talking about it and talking about treatment, I just had the epiphany of like, man, you really can't attach being a treatment provider to doing it in a specific alignment style, because you have to be so neutral and adaptable to whatever is going to be best for each individual client.
And you really hit the nail on the head with that last statement, because, the buzzword is culturally competent therapist, teacher, etc. However, most people don't get it, because each treatment plan has to include so many details that are specific to the person. I think about like abstinence only programs, whether it's SUD, no matter what substance that a person is addicted to, don't work.
Right.
Absolutely do not work. I think this is not accurate. I believe that the percentage of people who actually are successful in abstinence only programs is like in the 20s percent, whereas reconnection to community, bringing around supports that look like them and also that don't look like them, are in the 80s.
Right. Well, I mean, it makes sense. Like we learn early on in psychology that, avoidant behaviors only seek to increase, problematic behaviors. You want to have those sort of treatment plans that you're immersed in, you learn to deal with those things in your life, not just push them away, because that just creates a deeper level of fear. It creates a deeper level of longing in some senses, but you need to learn how to deal with those things being around you and being part of your life in a healthy way, rather than just pushing them away and trying to avoid them altogether. And
that's why I'm a psychodynamic therapist. Let's get to the heart of the matter and then really just look at it, look in the mirror. And I think that's why Rycroft upsets some people, because it is who we are as a person. We are all these multiple facets, and which one you're going to get today. And it's like, how would you treat a person like Rycroft? How would you treat a person like me or you or anybody? Because there's so many different things that we believe that are so intertwined. It's like trying to unravel a bowl of spaghetti and realizing it's just one giant clump of noodles.
Well, and another thing to consider too is, how does a character like Rycroft exist in a world that really isn't built with the ideals of our modern mental health system in place? The magic and clerics and healers and all that stuff are great, but not in any of the books do you hardly ever see any mention of, psychiatrist type characters. So it is, how would that world look for those people who do struggle with mental health issues, and being able to play those and function in a society of magic independently without that sort of assistance? So if you were to give advice to any of my listeners who were considering taking on such a Herculean task of playing 15 characters in one, how would you suggest that they go about organizing themselves to prepare for such a task?
Research would be number one, and not just in using real world examples, but what does it mean to be lawful evil, lawful good? The different alignments. What does that look like? How does that player act, or that character act? How would that be approached in different situations? With that instance with Rycroft attacking the guy protecting the dragon, I said he's lawful, and so therefore my character is acting on its lawful good, and understanding and knowing how that plays out. And then also understanding, what does it mean to have each personality? And that's where the research comes in, and knowing your limit, because playing multiple personalities means you're going to go to the darkest of the dark as well as the lightest of the light. And so knowing one's own limits, really the importance of self-care and boundaries, enabled me to have a character like this, because it's so easy to get wrapped up in the sorrow or the frustration or the anger towards how the mental health, how the foster care, how the different systems are here in America.
What do you keep for yourself as far as notes for each character? Does each of them have a backstory? do you have like a spreadsheet that talks about here's how I act when I am this character? Um, any personality traits or different voices, or how do you differentiate the change when you go from one personality to another as this character?
So I have a lot of tabs open. I do have an individual character sheet for every single one. I also have just a blank character sheet for equipment. Makes it a little easier.
Yeah.
But I also have a spreadsheet that helps me. It has what character it is, what their personality is, who they're based on, alignment, class, backstory. Each one has their own backstory.
Wow, that's crazy. That's a lot of work.
It is. It took a lot of development. It took a lot of research, and like, how do I pay? And again, it goes back to how do I pay tribute to all these people who are being ignored?
Yeah.
And that's why I'm so grateful that you invited me on here, because to talk about this, those of us who are impacted by mental health here in America know that it's a very sad case.
Mm-hmm. I think for me, what I find most daunting about it is like why I asked about leveling up, because I think that would be, oh yeah, good job guys, you gain a level. I'm like, oh great, I'm going to level up 15 different characters. But like the whole concept of playing it, that part to me sounds really fascinating. Normally I'm the type of player who I'll settle in with a pretty strong personality for my characters. I'll find a voice, I'll find, their backstory. I love doing all that part. So I think it would be interesting, kind of like the movie Split, the M. Night Shyamalan film, or the Marvel series Moon Knight, watching those actors and how they are able to change their entire acting style to portray the different characters. And I think especially in like the movie Split, you see probably more aligned with what you've got going on with your character, where you actually probably have some characters have different stats if they're in a different character. Yeah. See, I think that's cool. Like when you see the shift in that character in the movie, you can see he definitely does actually grow stronger, or he becomes more dexterous. Really, really interesting concept.
Another thing I'd ever say is, like, if you're going to build a character in any level, have fun with it. I'd say the backstory is so fun. I know sometimes it's a daunting task for players, especially new players. I think that's why I like 5e's, with the backgrounds. It almost just kind of, here you go. Let's make it easy for you. It almost seems like the dice kind of help you out with that. If you just roll the D6s the whole time, it's like, oh, this kind of fits. It's good. It's good.
I've always said, the dice know the story. And a lot of times when you're rolling for those backgrounds, they just end up working out and making sense.
Yeah. I think if somebody will mimic what I do, or already is mimicking, have fun with it anyway. I think having fun, because this is still fantasy. This is still something to do that is fun. I think at the point where it gets so taxing that it's not enjoyable anymore, or stimulating, or whatever the reason that a person goes into playing a fantasy game, it's not worth it.
So if you want to get in touch with Dan and chat with him a little bit more about this character concept, or talk to him about any other ideas or background that he's got, I will tag his Discord handle in the session notes. You'll be able to get in touch with him that way. But in the meantime, I do want to thank all of my listeners for tuning in today. As always, please leave me a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and check out my book, Session Zero, The DMG to Writing Great Campaigns in Any System. Thanks again, Daniel, for joining me today. I appreciate it.
Anytime, Robert, and thank you for having me, and willing to come back anytime. Actually, maybe this is a good time to extend a invite to you. My wife and I are starting our own podcast, and we're going to be analyzing comic book characters and the psychology and behind them, and
I love that idea. Absolutely. I am 100% down to be on that with you for an episode. That sounds like a blast. So cyclothids, hope you enjoyed this bonus episode, and we'll see you all next session.